Welcome to the Phoenix Effect podcast with Elle, Kristen, and Dennis. We are three narrative-trained therapists, and we will be interviewing storytellers from all walks of life. We will explore what people do to find belonging, purpose, and success. Listen in as we delve into the depths of the human experience. If you have a story you would like to tell, stay tuned to find out how to become a part of the show. Are you ready for a good story? Here we go.
Hello, everybody, and hello to our guest today, Sabrina. How are you doing today, Sabrina?
I'm doing well. Yeah, I'm so excited to be with y'all.
Oh man, we're so excited to have you here. First, would love to just introduce you to anyone who might be listening. So, would you mind telling us where you are located and what you like to do for fun and what you do professionally?
Yeah, so my name is Sabrina Norris. I'm a psychotherapist in Seattle, Washington. I have a private practice in the kind of Belltown, Queen Anne area of Seattle, where I do trauma work, specifically around sexual abuse and childhood trauma, as well as working with teens. A little bit about me. I am born and raised from Washington. I love getting outdoors. I'm a long distance runner, Enneagram 8. Yeah, I love to play and have fun, but also have those really intense conversations over a cup of coffee or a beer. A lot of mix there, but enjoy these spaces where we can talk about important stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your favorite thing to do in Seattle, just out of curiosity, if that's not putting you on the spot?
Oh gosh, that is a hard question. I think Seattle is one of the coolest cities when it comes to combining nature and city. So one of my favorite things to do in Seattle is go on walks along Lake Union or sit at Gasworks or along one of the beaches like Golden Gardens with friends, doing things that combine usually some good takeout food and the nature of Seattle.
Yeah, that sounds ideal. I love that. And are you currently accepting new clients in your practice?
Yes. Yeah, I am definitely accepting new clients, both teens and adults and couples. So building my client load. So yeah, if you
Awesome.
think of it, Sabrina Norris therapy, I'm accepting.
Incredible. We will put that in the show notes for anyone who wants to learn more or contact you about services.
Yeah.
Cool. I know you brought a story for us today. Before we get into it, I'm just curious, what was it like for you to write that?
Yeah, I was really thinking about a story where I was entering into a space that felt really good, but also really scary, and where I could find a story that I can identify parts of myself that really began to develop and I am very familiar with in my adult life, but where are some of those origins? And so it's a good process writing it, but it's always hard to return to those places of emotion or harm or whatever it may be. So cathartic, you could say, to write it, but good.
Yeah, I always have so much respect for anyone who's willing to do story work because anytime you're looking back on your past or anything like that, it takes a lot of courage. It's a really brave act to willingly say, I want to reopen some of these things from the past and not only reopen it, but allow other people to hear it and speak into it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah. Thank you for your bravery and your courage and your vulnerability. How do you feel about sharing your story with us?
Yeah, I would love to.
Cool.
I'll be reading it from a previous time writing the story. All right. Although I did not grow up in the Plymouth Brethren Christian tradition, my parents both did. This meant any weekend spent with my grandparents would bring my sister and I to their small chapel service in North Seattle. Plymouth Brethrens can be distinguished by their value of hymns and scripture, tight-knit community, and the silence of women. If I knew I was sleeping over at Oma and Opa's, as I called them, I would need to pack a modest outfit, often a long skirt and a shirt with the highest of necklines. As a little girl, going there felt like stepping into another world. It smelt like a library, and all the congregants somehow knew my name and what grade I was in. There was a couch in the women's bathroom that ladies would sit on after church and chit-chat as if they were in a secret club room. I felt so warm, and it was so kind there. It also felt like I stepped into a tradition that had hidden booby traps that, as an 8-year-old, I would be keen to learn quickly. The beginning of a Sunday service at this particular chapel included what was called the breaking of bread. All congregants would sit in a circle around a table, and men, only men, would be invited to stand and either invite the group to sing a hymn or would share something on his heart from the week of devout scripture reading. I sat with my Oma and Opa during the breaking of bread portion of church one sleepover weekend when I was in 2nd grade. I remember feeling the coarse woven fabric of the chair under my thin, long skirt. I was surrounded by women with lace head coverings and men in suits. They seemed funny to me and also people to be cautious around. There were other kids around me, but they appeared to take on what to do and how to act with pride. Man after gray suit wearing man stood up to share or bring us to song. My body became restless. Earlier that week, I'd come across an interesting bit of knowledge about Jesus. Surely this would be a welcomed addition to the morning meeting. But there were no other girls or old ladies standing. They just sat there, faces shadowed by lace. We sang the last warbles of a hymn, and I noticed my Opa opening his Bible in preparation to stand. My whole body filled with anticipation and excitement. He stood with his Bible flopped open in his strong left hand. Before I could think twice, there I was standing up next to him, grasping his available right hand. He only paused for a moment in surprise at his granddaughter's boldness, then continued to share with a slight grin on his face. I looked around in pride. Is this what it is like to be a man? I'm so important. Look, I'm sharing. Pride became quickly mixed with a sense of uncertainty when I noticed the women's faces. They looked ashamed of me, embarrassed. Did I just fall into one of the hidden booby traps? Did I do something irreparably wrong? My Opa and I sat back down, and he patted my hand gently that so audaciously reached out for his moments earlier. I stared at my feet. I did not see who, but some man stood to lead the congregation in closing prayer. I closed my eyes shut and prayed, please make me a man. Please make me a man. I want to be able to share and to be a pastor just like my Opa. Please make me a man.
Thanks so much for sharing.
Yeah.
I'm curious how that felt to read.
Yeah, I think when I was reading that last section of me standing up, there was that sense of sadness rushing over me as I thought about what is to come, you could say, of the rejection I felt as a woman in the church and the sweetness of the innocence for that split second to think, oh, I could maybe stand. I could maybe participate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this moment before you knew all of the rules completely.
Yeah.
And you are just living your full little Sabrina self in full confidence. But then it seems, yeah, there's this moment of, oh man, there's something not right here.
Yeah, the tradition was not my own. Like, I was not raised in such a conservative or fundamentalist sect of Christianity. And yet there was something very familiar or fitting to that rejection I felt that kind of bled into other parts of my life, both religious and not religious, just my experience of being a little girl.
I'm so curious, Sabrina, like what your relationship is to your voice, because in this story, this little girl has something to offer and share about Jesus. And I can't help but notice we never find out what it is, right? She's immediately silenced just by looking at the faces in the room. And so I don't know. I'm wondering, did this little girl already know to silence herself based on the looks on people's faces? What's happening here with her voice?
Yeah, it's really an interesting thought to think about my young little Sabrina self. Yeah, I'm curious about that. I think when I was around that age, like late elementary school, I think I was very bold to speak. I probably could be said to be still bold to speak, but I hadn't met the maybe contempt or envy that probably led to my mitigating or diplomacy of my voice. I think this was a time where I'm like, oh, I have something to say. Of course, I should be able to stand up in a room full of strangers and share that. And so, probably around this time was me learning the spaces where that's not invited. And it wasn't, my response wasn't necessarily an abandonment of thought, but maybe I choosing to bend or to silence and just still think boldly, but maybe not say as much.
She had so much to say, and it seems like the only way she could make sense of being heard would be to be a man.
Yeah. It was interesting as I wrote it, even I noticed I just wrote it freely. And then I noticed how that kind of thought or feeling that little girl had was like, oh, I'm sharing. As my Opa was speaking, look at me, I'm sharing. I wasn't sharing. I was just standing next to him sharing.
Because that's as close as you could get,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
was to stand next to a man that could talk.
Mm-hmm.
What does it do to realize that? What are you noticing even as you think about it now?
Yeah, that makes me angry. Like the injustice of that. Because I'm sure I am not alone in that experience. So it's like the amount of little girls, women who have a lot to say. Like that just makes me angry for them, for myself, for that little girl. And wanting to, yeah, I know I wanted to say something, but I, in my adult self, cannot remember what she had to think or say. And I'm like, oh, I wish I knew. I'm sure it would have been precious to hear.
And did anyone ever ask what that was about?
Ask, oh, that's interesting that you stood up. Like, why did you do that?
Yeah. What did you have to share that kind of had that impulse to stand? Did anyone notice that or get curious with you?
Hmm, not that I remember. As I wrote, like my Opa kind of patted my hand as like a recognition of, okay, that was cute. Like that, almost like a sweet bonding moment. Oh, so cute. But there wasn't like a, so yeah, after the service. So what did you think? Or no,
Quiet
I
and
don't.
cute.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, cute little girl. Cute.
Yeah, where you were standing there thinking you were a man or you
Yeah.
could be like a man. And then all of a sudden you're being told, no, you're a little girl. You're really
Mm,
cute.
yeah. Like a kid dressed up for Halloween. So cute dressing up as a man kind of posture.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I am a man. Like I'm not, but it was like that. No, I should be in that position.
Yeah. And then it seems like you just check out. You don't even remember who stands up after that. You're just like in this world of it just feels like dysregulating or there's like something going on there where it's incongruent. And so I'm wondering if there was like shame that may have been present or like what exactly you were feeling besides just, oh, I'm being put in my place, quote unquote.
Yeah. Yeah. If you think of that classic question of like, where did the contempt get in, or where is that contempt within the story? I think there was that turning on myself the minute I realized, oh no, clearly I didn't get it right. Clearly something wasn't, there was a booby trap, there was something I missed, and I should have known not to stand up. Really, yeah.
And that was the exact message that you were meant to receive. And it's interesting, Sabrina, that you mentioned in your story that it was the females that are sending that exact message to you. And yet there's a pat, right? So there's this consoling pat light reassurance maybe from your grandfather. Do you suppose your grandfather knew the looks that you were getting?
Oh, goodness. Probably. There's a chance he wouldn't. But I think, yeah, it's absolutely interesting and important that it was the women that I was really responding to. Somehow, I probably could say women have been the harshest in my experience of like gender roles within the church. Like, I think my strain from what women should be has been most responded to by other women.
Yeah.
And
I
this is
could,
the beginning of
huh.
that.
I felt like your grandfather almost got a pass kind of in the story because he could have, but yet you did note that, hey, afterwards, he never asked me, hey, I loved it when you stood up. What did you want to share? He had to have known that you were delighted and had something that was going on for you. To have jumped up in front of everybody, I'm certain he knew that. And yet he didn't ask you. And he was highly probably in tune with that you were going to be shamed by everybody. And all the men probably knew that. And that way they could sit back and look fine and allow the females to do what they maintain this system, because we can't have women jumping up and sharing anything. But I
Yeah.
felt like you maybe gave your grandfather a pass and were pissed off at the women. And I was curious about that.
Yeah, that is interesting. I think in a lot of ways, the dynamic I have had with certain leaders or certain people in the church that are men that have done a pat on the hand, a lot of the way it looks is, oh, I see something in you. Like, I see potential in you. But let it just be our secret and you just fall in line. That's been a pretty frequent response to moments I've stepped up or stepped out. And that does frustrate me. And I think you are right that this is a moment where I wasn't really invested in or thought deeply with. It was, oh, that was interesting. Or that was, yeah, cute, like I was saying earlier. Yeah, I definitely feel that sadness, like thinking about that. Like anger maybe comes when I think of like the women or like the judgment, but sadness is tied more to what you're speaking to.
I just picture all these entitled dudes standing up and them being the only ones. I can't even imagine how that, I can imagine how it comes to be that can happen, yet it's pretty effed up. And it just pisses me off even when I hear these stories about these dudes all making everything about themselves and then almost forcing the females to keep things in place. That's how I see. Of course, these females are going to look at you like that. And they're set up to do that likely by their husbands who are loving what it's like to be a male. What a great church to be a male in. What an effed up church to be a male in. And what a hard church to be like a little girl that has a story that she heard that she wants to share in.
Yeah. It almost feels like a system of triangulation where I am somehow in this middle space where I am stepping out from a more classic little girl submission and drawing near to the father, the male, and now I'm hated by the women. Like it's the classic envy, jealousy, hatred, and then I'm left to shame and contempt. And yet there's a loyalty to my Opa or to the males that I'm stuck with.
What's it like to live in between those worlds?
Oh, it sucks, Kristen. It absolutely does. And I think it is not, yeah, it's just really hard to, it's lonely. It's really hard to relate to within this kind of environment, traditional environment. It's hard to relate to anyone. And I think a lot of people leave for that reason.
There's an element you speak of in the story where you're seen, and it's where that everybody knows your name, what grade you're in, your school, all these things that are all maybe okay and you're seen for. But the minute that you would then jump into a man space, then it turns from you. Just an interesting dynamic. I'm noticing that there seemed to be some bit in the story of where you're known and get some attention, but then as soon as you try to push into the man's world of attention, it brings this extreme.
Yeah, it really only got worse from there as I became a middle schooler, and then I want to wear my studded True Religion jeans, and I dare to go to this church in jeans, and just things like that where I really continued to push, and then I continued to be met with that, oh, this isn't accepted.
Yeah.
And not only is it not accepted, but I'm thinking about this dynamic in your story where nothing is really explicitly said. It's you're always worried about these booby traps. Nobody is actually explicitly telling you anything, and yet you're expected to know everything.
Yeah, there's this rule too of like all women wear head coverings, but when you're a girl, it's like when you want to. But then I was always the only girl that didn't wear it. And so it's wait, but I thought I don't have to till I'm like 16. So why? So it was just like things like that where I wanted to know how to be a woman, and I just kept messing it up. But in my mind, I'm like, I got really curly hair. I don't want this like lace thing over it. It would look all like, in my mind, it wasn't even a religious choice. It was a style choice. And yet somehow it was wrong.
Mhm.
And how did you know it was wrong? Is anybody talking? Like, there's so much like unspoken things happening.
Yeah, no one would say anything. It was the faces or it'd be the other boys my age running the other direction from me. She is not safe to be around. It was the things I became hyper aware of.
And I'm curious if it's what it was like, because you seem to be a person who wants to say things explicitly, and you're in an environment where that man or woman is not accepted or welcomed.
Yeah. And I remember it being odd too, because my Oma and my Opa, but very much my Oma was very direct, very much like me. Like I felt like she and I were very similar. But then it was almost like she went through a veil and she was silenced. And so I saw her experiencing, she was still spunky, but she was not speaking to any of these things. And so I picked that up pretty quick.
Yeah. Oma and Opa weren't helping out. Your parents, who supposedly grew up in this faith, aren't preparing you before you go to a weekend away and are going to be in a new culture and environment than is what is normal for you. They're not telling you anything. All these people at the church that know all about your life and what's going on, they don't want to tell you anything. Gosh, that sucks.
Yeah. And I think the response that I often take in those moments is, okay, armor up. I'm okay. Like that Enneagram 8, right? That I mentioned earlier. I'm going to just be okay. Send your arrows. It's okay. And that's not how I actually felt, obviously. But at the time, I don't think I had why aren't people helping me? Or why didn't Oma and Opa talk to me? It was, that's okay. I shouldn't expect any help.
Yeah. And what was the cost of that for you?
Gosh, I think I went a lot longer than I would have hoped. Viewing myself as like a broken woman or not a normal person in any faith setting. Like I always just thought something was wrong with me because I wasn't submissive or quiet.
And nobody cleared that up for you, right?
No. And I was involved camps over the summers, youth group. There's a lot of different people that could have cleared that up throughout my teenage years. And it wasn't until I left church environments and left these faith settings that I found out that I was not this bad woman, which is sad. That's not how it should be.
That's so heartbreaking that you have to leave the church that promotes love for others to find out that you are so lovable.
Not only are you lovable, but what you have to say matters.
Yeah.
And that there's people who want to hear it.
Yeah. That's not just a pat.
Exactly.
Yeah. Your voice is important.
Yeah.
How do you find, like now in your present day life, in your relationship with your voice and community and connection, what does that look like for you now?
That's funny. I was talking about that a lot today in different environments. This is something I constantly have to think about and be wrestling with. I think it has been both my like work and my joy to surround myself with people who desire my largeness, my vivacity, my tenderness, all of me. I've chosen a profession as a therapist where that is good and needed, to have that synthesis of tenderness and intensity and ability to hold things. So a lot of what it looks like today is just engaging and pursuing spaces that it is seen as gift instead of dismissed or not wanted. And just continuing to think of it in a nuanced and complex way, because it's never black and white. Rejecting all things that feel too feminine or womanly just because I was hurt by my lack of being that classic feminine submissive woman isn't going to serve me either. So just trying to hold nuance to it. And then also running and being super intense and like expressing my intensity in my voice other ways when I know that I won't always have a platform or a space to speak.
I love that you made the choice to come on this podcast and have your voice heard. It is such like a vulnerable thing to do, to share a story like this and it's going against everything that you know, right? Like you're standing up like a man in your childhood, right? Like everybody can hear this. And how does that feel?
Feels good. Yeah. There is a vulnerability of, oh gosh, what if a listener listens to this and says, oh, I wish she hadn't spoken, that kind of, in whatever form that would look like. But then there's such a joy of standing, as we say. And I really couldn't do it any other way. Like I've chosen the path of standing and using my voice.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Thanks for standing, Sabrina. So good to see you.
Yeah.
Hey, and then, hey, Sabrina, just to wrap, I know that we're coming to a close here, but I am curious because there's an element like of the church, like in this story, and even then particularly about the church and males within this church really taking the voice away from like a young girl that actually had something important to say. I guess if you were given a voice right now to the church, is there a message? Like what message would it be that might be important that you would want to say?
Oh, Dennis, what a soapbox you put under my feet. That's so hard. I definitely still have feet in that world, though I'm not in the religious or Christian tradition as I once was. But I so often desire for men just to humbly recognize the system that is against women, like to all degrees. Like even if women are on a church staff, maybe they're not allowed to pray one-on-one with a pastor just because she's a woman, and the intern boy can there's so many systematic ceilings to women that I really just wish men in the church would just at least recognize, like, start there, and then please empower women, be a part of the integration of all creation instead of this siloing of people's experiences and people's identities just for the sake of rightness or correctness or accuracy. It's not worth it.
That'll preach, sister. That'll preach. Yeah, just a final thought is just how this is true with all connection, belonging, but it's when you step into your true self unapologetically that you're able to find the connection and belonging that you were looking for so long. And in your case, hiding yourself for so long, trying to find that connection and not able to because you weren't showing up as you. And once you're able to embrace yourself and be more unapologetic about your voice, it's, oh, I found my people. Like I found my crew. I found people who value what I have to say. And what a powerful thing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
And that's where we end today. We are so glad you joined us. We want to invite you to get involved in the show. First, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. That way, you don't miss out on a future episode. If you are super curious, you can also find us on YouTube. Second, if you'd like to learn more about joining us and sharing your story, send us an email at phoenixeffectpodcast@gmail.com. That's phoenixeffectpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. This podcast and website represents the opinions of Elizabeth Key, Kristen Boskel-John, and Dennis Roberts, and their guests to the show and website. The content here should not be taken as medical or psychological advice. This content is for informational purposes only, and because each person is so unique, please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions. The views and opinions expressed in the podcast and website are our own and do not represent that of our places of work. While we make every effort to ensure that the information we are sharing is accurate, we welcome any comments, suggestions, or correction of errors. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or website. In no way does listening, reading, emailing, or interacting on social media with our content establish a therapist-client relationship.